Welcome, thanks for coming. My name is Diane Hale, I know most of you. Usually this is the part where I introduce the world-renowned speaker. Tonight I am the speaker, although I'm not world-renowned, so that's all right. But I do want to talk to you about this topic that is an interest of mine, and it's just to talk about how are we preparing our students for this century that we're in, this 21st century, and what does it mean to be a 21st century learner? And if you read anything in education, you've heard that term before, 21st century learning, and maybe that's thrown about in a way that's kind of random. So I'm going to try to help get that a little bit more specific for you. We will overlap a little bit and talk about how it's really critical to talk about the role for gifted students in the 21st century and how that really goes hand in hand with them. So I have done this workshop before, by the way, so if you have heard it and you've realized that midway between and say, oh, I don't want to hear this again, that won't hurt my feelings. But there's lots of good interaction, so here's the plug to stay. There's lots of good interaction, too, with other parents in here. So if you've got the handout, you see that that is one of my goals for you tonight, is to give you an opportunity to collaborate with other parents of gifted children, and I know that's an important piece for many of you. We're going to identify traits common to 21st century learners and gifted students, and so see again where they overlap. I'm hopefully going to present you with some practical approaches for how do you communicate with your child. Gifted kids communicate differently than other kids, and the world that we live in kind of lends itself to children communicating differently, so I'm going to try to help you with that. And then some parenting behaviors that you can do. And it's funny that I say parenting behaviors, not child behaviors, because a lot of times it's like if you've had a puppy, right? You know, raising a puppy is really about changing your behaviors. It's not really about changing the puppy. And so that's kind of a good analogy for gifted students too. It's about what can you do to change, what different things can you say or do that may help change some of the behaviors. So I want to start off, though, by asking you to reflect on some things from your own childhood. Maybe we don't do this enough. But I want you to think about, what did you love to play as a child? And this is on your handout. What was your favorite television show? What's a fond childhood memory you have? And a new invention you can remember having for the first time. And I'm not going to ask you to share that. I just want you to kind of get those things in your head so that you can go back a little bit in time and think about some of those things. I think it's important that we think about ourselves at that time, because it happens like that, right? You find that with your own kids. Gosh, they're growing up already. But the truth is, there's so much that has changed. And so when you go back and think about being that child and the things that you like to play or the things that you like to do or the inventions that came into being when you were a kid, and then you think about today, you will realize how fast the world is changing and how it's so important that we prepare students. Those are our goals tonight. So really, when we think about education, and you've heard this too, but education, the way it still is today, was really designed for a totally different world. So summers off, who knows why schools always had summers off? For crops, right? How many of your kids work in the crops in the summertime? None of them? That's crazy. So there were so many things that set up this system. And I think education is one of the systems that is actually slowest to change in many regards, because we have this nostalgia about it. We have this, but you know what, when I went to school and when I was a kid, this is how it was, and we want the same for our children as what we had. But when we really think about how the system was designed, do we want it that way? So I often ask you to think about your mother's kitchen. When you were growing up, the kitchen that your mom cooked dinner in, or your grandmother, or somebody in your life cooked dinner in. Would you want to make Thanksgiving dinner in that kitchen? Probably not. It just doesn't function the same. We don't entertain the same way. The tools aren't quite the same, and so it's a different world. And we really want to make sure that, you know, if we think about it, our schools and our classrooms shouldn't be the same either. So I just want you to think about some of these pictures I have up here. So the first one is, it's really small, it's hard to see, I know, but a couple of kids gathered around an old black and white television. almost looks like this is the first TV that their family had. And then I'm just going to, show how old I am. But I can truly remember getting the first VCR in my house. And I remember as a kid thinking, wait a minute, I don't have to be home to watch my favorite show, and we can set it up and record it and then watch it later. And that was just so exciting. We had a beta too. Do you remember those? That was before VHS. And so that's what that little guy in the center is doing. And now you probably wouldn't think of taking a long road trip without some sort of portable DVD or something like that for your kids to be entertained by in the back of the car. And be aware that when I say all these things, there is no judgment. It's not good or bad. It's not, those were the better days and now we've come to it. It just is what it is. So there's really no judgment. As you think about, okay, this one is just really supposed to be funny, but maybe it's not. But I kind of think about O.J. Simpson. And remember the commercial of O.J. running through the airport? That's what I remember as a kid. But then I remember as an adult that white Bronco chase, and that's kind of what stuck in my mind with O.J. And now, I don't know, I think he's in prison again or out of prison again or something like that. But there are these landmark times that if you said, depending on the age of person that you said, oh, yeah, remember that O.J. scene on TV? It might be different for different people, right? Certainly tragedies that are landmark tragedies that we remember from different times in our life. So the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Is today the anniversary of that, actually? Friday. So I know there are plenty of people that remember exactly where they were on that day and can recall that in great detail. I remember being a high school student at the shuttle explosion, and just, you kind of have that experience, you remember that. And then, of course, 9/11, and we remember where we were then. It's interesting now, our children don't remember that, weren't here for that. And so just kind of interesting that they live in a world where that has always been part of history. So when you think about things like that, it paints a picture for you. Television families have changed. And so what you associate with with the television family of your childhood is kind of interesting. And so is it the Leave It to Beaver family? Then we saw the Bradys, which was kind of this interesting sort of blended family that they really never talked about how that blending happened, but it just did. And now, then The Simpsons, and actually, really, I should change that slide. One of my new favorite shows is Modern Family, which really shows a blending of a variety of different kinds of families. Again, this is not a good or bad, right or wrong. This is what our children are exposed to see when they think family. It has changed from maybe what we used to think of as family. Think about icons. This is another thing that defines a generation. The musician that you lost. And it's funny, it's not the musician that's popular, it's the musician that died during your coming of age is what's a landmark. Kids don't know who John Lennon is. So again, just to have that perspective, if you're a good Beatles fan, that you're at home teaching them that, hopefully. So, but again, that's what they think of is sort of who those icons are that their generation lost. Of course, music itself really defines a generation, and we all know that. But it's interesting to think about music now in such a different way because of the devices that the music is on. So I remember making mixtapes for friends, right? And then, you had that first boyfriend, and he'd make a mixtape for you. And that meant a lot because that took hours to make a mixtape. You got to play the song. And now, I don't think kids make playlists for each other. There's a playlist on your iPod. Buying music happens just with a couple of clicks of the thumb. There isn't that record store experience of we go in the record store together and kind of hang out and look at those things. So we're really creating, or what we're seeing is a new generation. And it happens all the time, right? So they used to say that a generation was about 25 years. So a new generation, you consider what a new generation is about 25 years. That actually is speeding up because of the changes that happen within almost 12-year spans. So the generation born after 2002 is considered, they call it now Generation Z. And I think partly, you heard of baby boomers and Generation X, and then they kind of run out of monikers just because it's so different. But when we think about the children born after 2002, I always kind of think about that sign, that baby on board sign, the little yellow yield sign in the car window. And it was almost a time, and really this started to happen in the 90s, when having a baby became a fashionable thing. And it became something that people took great pride in showing, I have a baby and this is a precious cargo, be very careful. Prior to then, the jokes are that our parents kind of threw us in the car and said, let's just hope for the best, right? And that's, why do I tell you that? Is because it defines who we are. So depending on how old you are and when you had children, what happens is that as Generation Xers, and I'll just kind of group many of us in that Generation X group, as Generation Xers, we were raised a certain way, and then so we raise our children almost in a kind of reactionary way. So it's like a pendulum swing. So what defined Generation X is they were kind of left alone. Okay, we were, if you think about the movies that were very popular for Generation X, it was Ferris Bueller's Day Off, yeah, right? It was The Breakfast Club. Where are the parents in any of those movies, right? There are no adult figures. And that's because we were a generation of, this is about us, and those adult people are over here, they don't get us, and we're kind of doing our own thing. So we grew up and became parents who said, but I am going to be involved. I am going to stay on top of this and go to not only all of the games, but all of the practices as well. And that's a great thing. Again, there's no judgment, there's no right or wrong, but it starts to define an entire generation of people. And we're starting to see that, and it makes them different types of learners when they do come to school. So some characteristics that you'll see of Gen Z, and that, again, those are children born after 2002, they're very optimistic. And again, this is in part because as parents and adults that surround them, we give them hope all the time. This is great, this is fantastic, everything's going to work out. So they're very optimistic, and they're optimistic about the future. Very different than we were. As young people, Generation Xers were, we'll see what happens. Very tech savvy, obviously. It's funny to me just hearing people talk about their 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds and say, and it's so amazing, and she can take the iPad and she knows to touch it, and things change. That's like saying, and we gave her a rattle and she shook it, right? It's a very natural thing. It's part of their environment, so there's nothing really that remarkable. There really isn't. Sorry, I'm not telling your child's not gifted. They are. But there's nothing remarkable about a child in this day and age being able to use technology and being attracted to it. They know it's how the television comes on. They know it's how their entertainment is. And so they're very interested in that, very tech savvy. They tend to be a very collaborative group and really crave that collaboration. Part of that, again, is parenting. Now there are play groups. Okay, when we were little, we just went and played. Or we just played in our room. But now there's a play date and a play group. And we very much go about organizing this for our children and bringing other children together. As they are teenagers, our Gen Z learners, as they are teenagers, their world of collaboration is huge because they have Facebook and they have Twitter and they have phones that they can text and have several different conversations at once with several different friends. So again, this is not good or bad, it just is, but the collaboration is really important to them. They're very appreciative of clear structure from adults, and that's because we've given it to them. This is what you're doing at this time, this is what you're doing at this time, this is when we eat. You've done this since they were babies. And so they like that, they're very comfortable with that structure, and they like to have, let me have the structure, let me know what it is. And then we'll talk a little bit about gifted kids, how sometimes they say, thank you for the structure, and here's how I need to change it for me, but we'll talk about that. They have strong parent advocates. This is this is the first generation we have seen that has the largest, the most advocacy for their children in decades. You know what school should be for your children. You demand it. You expect it, not only in school, but in their play, in their clubs. And again, that goes back to the way that we were raised very differently. You know, maybe our parents slowed down so we could get out of the car for baseball practice or whatever. You're all attending. You know, I'm attending the practice, I'm attending the game, I'm interested, I want to know how you're doing. The term, you've all heard the term helicopter parents, right? You know, that's something of we're just going to be right here all the time. We're just always going to know. It's a very multicultural generation. This is one of my favorite things about this generation. They don't really see color. They don't really have any idea. When last names sound a little different or spelled a little different, even first names, they have no idea. They don't recognize that or notice it. And that's kind of a cool thing, because it's not really until we point out that, oh, well, they must be from, you know, another country, or they must have a different nationality. And you'll find that your child probably goes, oh, really? How did you know? I didn't notice that. And that's kind of a cool thing. They're a very confident group of children. And again, this goes back to what we've done as a community around them. We build that confidence. We tell them that they're great. And that's, again, a good thing to do. It's a very civic-minded generation. So they are very concerned about the environment. They're concerned about their community. They want to help other people. And it doesn't take a lot for them to realize that selfless acts feel good. And they're almost selfish about it. I want to do that. I want to help. I want to be on that committee. So that's really good news. It's certainly not an apathetic generation. They're very goal-oriented. Part of the theory about this, when there's generation theory of that goal-oriented, is part of it comes from video games that are you're going to try and get this many, and then you get to this level, and then you get to this level. So it's very progressive in how they go through games and play, and so that's very attractive to them. So that setting goals is very appealing to bright kids. They have the ability to multitask, but do be careful with that one, because none of us, the human brain, can't multitask as well as we think we can with all of the gadgets and things like that are around. However, it is a generation of children that can do pretty well multitasking. Now, that is to say, music is on and I can also read. So that's probably something they can do pretty well. They can't listen to a television program and read, or listen to you and text. So just be clear, so things that require the same type of thinking, so comprehending verbal directions, you can't do two of those at once. Nobody can. And that's true for kids too. But they can multitask in many other ways. So those are some of the characteristics, and you've probably seen those in your own children. But just to talk about some things about Generation Z, they're very well educated. Okay? Generation Z will have more education than any of us combined. It starts sooner too. The levels of math and science that children are getting in school now is well beyond what most average adults our age now got at all. This is changing a little bit. The research says this is recently changing, but they tended to be more material endowed, meaning this is what advertisers figured out just prior to the downturn of the economy. But you probably noticed this, that advertisers went right after teenagers and kids, even about 9 to 12 years old, the tweens, of that's who we're going for because that's who spends money. Oh, and newsflash, guess what? They don't really have money. They're not really spending money, but you are spending for them. So even at the downturn of the economy, what business leaders found is that parents will hold back on something for themselves. We're not going to go out to dinner as much, but we will spend for our child to maintain the sports activities that he or she wants to do after school, or get the new clothes or things like that. So kind of an interesting thing. This is really powerful, and it just kind of makes me think all the time. They are headed for careers that do not exist right now. And I can't stress how important that is for educators enough. As educators, we have to constantly be thinking, and you as parents do too. They are headed for careers that do not exist. So we cannot set aside anymore and say, well, you know what they'll have to know. This is what they really should know. I know there's some debate right now a little bit in the news about cursive handwriting. Do they need it? Do they not need it? Is everything going to be keyboarding? The truth is we have no idea. And that's kind of exciting, and it's a little bit scary, too, to not know exactly what they'll need. They're likely to have at least 5 careers in their lifetime, which is really new. We, as a generation, set out to, this is what I'm going to do, and then you do it for 30 years, and then you retire, and that's it. They are a generation that sets into a career knowing that it's not forever, which is kind of interesting. I had the really unique and special opportunity of having coffee with a former student of mine who is a 28-year-old teacher now. And so it was really fun that she's a teacher, and so we just had a great time catching up. And something in the conversation, she said something about, well, and then I'm applying for law school. That's what she had said. So, or when I apply for law school. And I said, what do you mean law school? I thought you're a teacher. And she said, well, for now. And then I'm going to go to law school, and I'm going to practice law. And I really kind of had to sit and think and go, what do you mean? Is this a, and I wasn't sure whether to be proud or sort of insulted that she was leaving teaching. And I said, do you not like it? And she said, no, I love it. I'm not doing it forever. There's a lot of things I want to do. So I think that's pretty interesting, too, is that they see this life as a big, long life. And I can do lots of things in that. And so that's pretty exciting. And we talked about they tend to be very concerned about the environment and global concerns. They tend to be they will be a very transient workforce. Moving is not a big deal. Where the work is where they'll go. And they'll live here for a little while, live here for a little while. Relationships will get them to move. Lots of things will get them to move. Whereas, again, prior generations typically moved either just for the career, the one career, or for family. And then that's usually one big move. We're finding lots more moves. They need constant feedback. And we're going to talk some more about feedback and the difference between feedback and praise. But the research tells us that this is a generation that needs feedback more than ever in history. How am I doing now? How about now? How does this look? What do you think of this? And the interesting thing about it is it doesn't have to be positive feedback. They're actually really pretty good with, nope, this is not what I'm looking for. Go back and do it again. Okay, great. Thanks for telling me. So they just want to know. It doesn't have to just be positive. Diversity, equality, we talked a little bit about that. The last one is interesting. So it says generous access to technology as children, but limited physical freedom means Gen Z will grow up fast. The erosion of their childhood may see many of them breaking out of the rat race later on in life. And so this is the idea, is that as parents, we sort of restrain their physical freedom. Okay, no, you can't do that. You can't go out there. It's too late for that. I'm going to go with you. Who else is going to be there? So we've really restrained some of those things, what they can play with, where they can play, how they play. But their technology, and you might be saying, yeah, but I limit my kids' technology too. And you do, in a sense. They also know that in the palm of their hand, there's a whole big wide world out there. So where for us, freedom meant getting your driver's license and getting out there. For them, it's if I could just have that data plan with unlimited, that's really all it is. And that really is true. We're also seeing with this generation less students as eager to get their driver's license. I think that's interesting too. That doesn't mean, that doesn't have the symbol of freedom as it did for us. It just means you're going to make me go get milk, I guess. I don't know what it means to them. But they're not as interested in getting their driver's license and those kinds of things because freedom suddenly means something else, and that independence. So every teenager kind of goes through some of those same things of wanting independence. It just now looks different. And so we see some of that. So I want to talk to you, well, do this first, and then we'll talk about gifted students. But so at the turn of the century, the United States Department of Labor put out this, what they call the SCANS report. And this is the Secretary's Commission on Achieving Necessary Skills. What are the skills necessary for the 21st century? And they asked different labor groups all across the country of what is it? And interestingly enough, or maybe not so interesting, they said basic skills, which we know, great. We cover those in school. We take care of that. Reading, writing, performing math, and math operations, listening, speaking well. This is what we handle best in school. This is what we test. This is what we measure. We know we're doing really well with that. Interestingly enough, though, they also came up with thinking skills. We need a workforce, they said, that thinks constructively, will look for alternatives. They'll solve problems. They know how to learn, and they know how to reason. As we've worked less globally, more locally in Chandler with local businesses, high-tech industry, we've done a lot of work with Intel and even some smaller ones, and said, how are we doing as a school district? How are we doing to prepare students? And they say, you know what? You're never going to be able to keep up with some of the skills, the specific skills that they need in terms of math and science and engineering and some of those things. I mean, you know, of course those basic skills, but you're never going to be able to teach them the nuances that they need because it changes so much. But if you could build a workforce that can think on their feet and can think creatively and constructively and look for alternatives, that would be great. The other surprising thing that came out of the report was personal qualities. So industry said, we'd like people that display responsibility, self-esteem, sociability, self-management, integrity, and honesty. They said, we have to fire more people because of those things than because they don't have the skills or because they can't think on their feet, but because they don't have integrity or they weren't honest or they don't play well with others. So kind of an interesting dilemma for educators, to be perfectly honest with you, because this is what we know how to do and how to measure. And this is sort of what I tend to, when I talk to teachers, I call this is the hidden curriculum. This is what we're expected to do, and I think we do a really good job of it, but it's really hard to measure. It's really hard to see exactly how that's happening. But they're very important. So as we move forward, I want to talk about gifted students in particular. So if you look in your handout on number 3 there, if you have a pen or pencil, you can click off the ones that you noticed in your child, and you might not notice them all. And I don't know, they don't totally match up to what's on the screen, because I have more on your handout than what's on the screen. But if you heard my presentation about the CATS program in general and the characteristics of gifted children, you've seen some of these before. And I guess what I'm trying to do here is dovetail these so that you see that a lot of what's happening for 21st century learners is really appropriate for gifted learners. And so we're in a good place, I guess. They tend to have a variety of interests, excellent memory, long attention span for something that they're interested in. That's the star there. Unusual curiosity. They have persistence in attacking difficult mental tasks. And this is one of my favorite things to watch, is you see that, ooh, this is a puzzle. I want to work on this. I want to do this. So this is fun for me. And that's definitely a gifted trait. The good problem solving and reasoning abilities, that language development is really sophisticated. And you've heard me talk about probably that heightened sensitivity. And that's probably one of the most common characteristics of gifted children, is that heightened sensitivity. And it could be emotional sensitivity, or it could even be physical sensitivity, sensitivity to bright lights. It could be any of those things, but that heightened sensitivity. Sometimes we see that that's what comes out in some of that civic responsibility. They're sensitive to someone else's needs. They have empathy before maybe other children develop that skill of empathy. And then please notice up there too, a lot of allergies, that has to do with sensitivity as well. So that's just, those are actual traits. So when we look at the traits of 21st century learners, and we look at the traits for gifted students, and you can kind of see where they overlap, what's becoming so important is that we teach critical thinking and problem solving. It's a great thing, but I think it's a little bit of a difficult thing for gifted education, because this has always been true for gifted education, but in the 21st century, we're seeing that it's more important for every child to get that critical thinking and problem solving. I just came back from Indianapolis, where I attended the National Conference for Gifted Education. And they talked a lot about this idea of, let's be careful that just because we're teaching problem solving and critical thinking to all children, it doesn't mean that we still don't need special programs for gifted children, because they still need that collaboration and those peers to collaborate with and have common interests with. But more than ever before, we see the problems of the 21st century are problems that cannot be solved by standard algorithms, if you will, the way that they used to. So before we go on to the next part, I want you to think about the characteristics of your child, this 21st century world that we live in. And again, I'm not going to ask you to share this, but this is just so that you can have an active mind as we go through the workshop. Think about a number 4 of, is there a recent encounter, or is this something that's been happening in your house with your child that you think, you know, I'd love to have a redo on that. Wish I could kind of go back and do that differently. So look at number 4 and just either jot something down or just have it in your head. Wish we would have solved that particular problem or that issue maybe a little differently. Hopefully we'll fix some of those. So we're going to talk about how we really start to help build critical thinkers and problem solvers in ways that you can do at home. That this isn't just something that we do at school, that this is something that you should be doing at home, and you can help by helping them do that. And part of it is modeling. And so we're going to go through several things that as your role of the parent is to model, to manage, of course, really to empower your child, and also to praise them. And we're going to spend some time on praise so that we're careful with that. But we're going to first talk about modeling. Your children learn more watching you than they do from what you say. And you know that. I mean, and that's been true since they were babies. But sometimes you might not realize some of the things that they do pick up that you model. And it's good things, too. Sometimes you notice that they pick up really good things that you model that you didn't even know that they were paying attention to. And so that's not just a be careful what swear words you use, because they'll pick up on those. That also means they notice when you say please and thank you to other adults. They notice those things as well, too. So we'll talk about some of those things. Just to break it down to some do's and don'ts, some good things to model so that your child sees is that you express your feelings with words. It is okay as the parent to be frustrated and to say, I'm frustrated right now. I'm upset right now. I don't like the way this is happening right now. Definitely to do that. It is a good thing for them to see you use anger control. Not that you don't ever get angry, but that you know how to control it. So that you might say, you know what, I don't really want to talk about this right now. This is kind of upsetting to me. That's actually a great thing to model. You should resolve conflicts with your spouse or parenting partner in front of your child. And that's one that I think a lot of times you think not to do that, and you might say to your spouse, yeah, let's talk about this later, not in front of the child. And actually, that's really a great way to model conflict resolution. It's very calming for them to see, oh, you sort of get mad at each other too, and you have a way of working it out. Now, you have to make sure that your way of working it out is also an okay thing for your child to see. So if you yell and throw things, maybe don't model it in front of them. But if you have a way of, okay, we're going to talk about this. And it might be a good idea, too, to say, you know what, let's talk about this later, and let's make sure that we do it in front of the kids, and let's be very poignant about how we're doing this. Many couples choose never to do that, and this is whether you're a married couple or you're even a divorced couple that live in 2 separate homes. It's healthy for your child to see you talking about those things and getting them out. so that they, again, have that tools of, oh, that's how people listen to each other. That's how people talk to each other. It is important that you distinguish between adult conversations and child conversations, however. So thinking about things, other family members, gossiping with the neighbor, you know, we all have weak moments as adults. Be careful that your child doesn't chime in on those and, oh yeah, I want to be in on that. If you have especially issues that are related to your child, whether it's with the school or with another family member, something like that, if it has to do with the child, it's probably a good idea that they're not witness to that. So, of course, some of the things to not do, don't use physical aggression. Even slamming things around, that counts. Physical aggression doesn't just mean hitting. It means kind of losing your cool. So it is okay to say, I need to go for a walk for a minute. I need to be by myself. That's actually a great thing for your child to hear you say, but they don't need to see you throw something across the room. But while you want to resolve conflicts, what you don't want to do is criticize the parenting of your parenting partner or spouse. You know, you always tell him to do that. Don't tell him to do that. You're giving him too many directions at once. And you do that in front of the child, and then they're like, oh, yeah, who's going to win this battle? And then you've kind of just put them in a power play situation. Don't use sarcasm when you're angry, or really ever. Sometimes sarcasm just doesn't have the effect that we think it's going to. Sometimes we think, oh, it's going to lighten the mood, and often it does not. Don't pout or give the silent treatment, again, because your child picks up on that and then they do it. Oh, that works for you? Then I'll do that too. It is okay to say, I don't want to talk about this right now. You know, I'm kind of tired. Can we talk about this later? And that's okay to do. This is one of my favorites. Don't pretend to get it when you don't. In other words, I know that must be hard when you haven't really heard the whole thing through or you really don't understand it. Take a moment to say, tell me what you mean, and really be a good listener. So you can be the best model in the world and there's still going to be some behaviors, right? And you have to manage that. You have to, in front of others sometimes, and just with your child, you have to manage. The word discipline, though, I have the definition for discipline up there, is to train by instruction and practice, especially to teach self-control too. So somewhere along the line, I think we thought discipline was a bad word and that it means to be in trouble or to be scolded. And really it doesn't. It means to teach with love. And so that's what you should do as a parent, is to discipline. And again, what we know about this generation of learners and what we know about gifted students is they like that feedback. So part of your managing behaviors, it's really going to be okay to be totally honest and say, this is not acceptable. So we'll talk about some of those techniques. The most important thing, though, that you need to know about this is that, and some of you came to hear Dr. Belgian, and I learned this from him years ago, and it's very true. But when cognition goes up, emotion goes down, and vice versa. So they're two different centers in your brain, and emotion and cognition don't usually happen at the same time, okay? So this is a tool for you. It's a tool for your child because your highly able, cognitively gifted child, you can use this against them, right? So when they're emotional and out of control, raise the level of cognition. Make them think, because they'll stop crying or they'll stop being angry. When you find that they're crying over homework and you're saying, no, let's look at number 3. Here's what you're asking the brain to do. Be emotional and cognitive at the same time, and it can't do that. So then guess which one wins? Emotion wins in those cases, always. So you want to see how you can control that. So what is cognition? Something that you have to think, you have to problem solve, you have to figure out. Emotion is, well, you know what emotion is, but all of those feeling words that you might use. So try not to mix those in your language when you say, this is really upsetting because it's hard and I know you're so frustrated, but let's try number 3. That's really confusing. So instead, you kind of move into that cognition land as much as you can by asking some really factual type questions. And so maybe, well, when did you do this last? Oh, well, how many pages is this? Well, let's see. How many pencils do you have? Let's get all the pencils out. And maybe we should get some markers too. So all of a sudden, wait a minute, what are you doing? I'm getting you to think about something maybe else, and then we're in that cognition mode, and then we can do the homework, okay? So thinking about some of those things, and I think I have on here, I have some on here that you can do on your handout. And again, a lot of these work for younger children. As your kids get older, they know the tricks a little bit. But sorting out the spoons and forks from the dishwasher. When you have an upset child, okay, maybe talk to me about this a little bit while you're helping me sort out the forks from the spoons. So then you're going to get more of the factual story. Then you're going to get the emotional, and I hate school, and this isn't fun, right? You're going to get, well, what happened today after recess? You're going to get that more just the fact story if you're engaging that cognition. The other one I have here is just that distraction. Hey, let's look at the moon. Have you seen it lately? Just total distraction. Look at something else totally. But what you can't do is say, let's not think about what's upsetting you right now, okay, because that doesn't work. I just have some other things there that are just questions, things like that. I will tell you, I have not had this not work for me in school. So working with kids and you see an upset child, come for a walk with me, and you start walking with them, and then quickly you just start talking about, isn't that weird that those pine cones grow mostly on this side of the tree, but there aren't any on that side, and there's no more tears. Yeah, why is that? Why do they do that? It's a trick that works even better with gifted kids because they're really sort of seduced by that cognition. They're compelled, so they really like that. So that's one that will really help you manage behaviors, and you want to get that emotion down because emotional behaviors are often irrational behaviors, and that's when some of those other things. What is important, though, is that children need to have their feelings acknowledged, and gifted children even more so. They need to feel heard. Sometimes gifted kids don't realize that there's a hierarchy, that you're in charge, and they really don't. And I say that only partly funny. A lot of times they do think, what, we're equals, right? So what's really helpful is that you hear them. So you need to identify their feelings. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it. You just have to help identify it. So you sound disappointed. And that's a great thing to do, is give them some different words instead of cranky, upset. You let them, well, that sounds disappointed. That sounds frustrated to me. You should acknowledge their feelings, but you don't have to do it with even words. You could just do it with a sound. I know. Just nodding. I love this one. Give the child in fantasy what you can't give them in reality. And this one's just a great one because they feel heard. Say, I know, wouldn't it be great if there was just a magic wand that would do all your chores for you? And then you just let them have that just for a minute in fantasy. I know, that would be great, wouldn't it? You can accept their feelings and not accept bad behavior. So sometimes that's confusing, that you think, well, I have to accept their feelings, and they're on the floor kicking and screaming, but I have to accept their feelings because, Diane said to. So here I go, okay, I see you're upset. Nope. What you can do is say, I see that you're angry, but stop that. That's not acceptable. Sit in a chair and I'll listen to what you have to say. So it's okay to say, I see you're upset. You're allowed to be upset. What you don't want to do is, don't be silly. This is nothing to be upset about. That's the most frustrating thing a child can hear because they are upset. Okay. So think about some of those that you could use just to kind of, what are some things that maybe you thought and you jotted down that you wish you could do over? Is there a way that you could have acknowledged their feelings? And maybe think back to, ooh, the last time you had a difficulty, did you acknowledge their feelings, or did you say, I don't care that you don't want to do your chores, I said that you had to, because I'm the mommy, right? That old saying, that doesn't work really well. As much as possible, and I talk to teachers a lot about this too, is you want to limit punishment. Punishment should be the last thing from your mind. Unfortunately, what happens, and to teachers and parents, is that you want to punish because it seems quick. Nope, if you do that, this happens. This results in this. But what you need to do is kind of think your way through it so that you can get away without punishing but still fixing the behavior. So point out a way to be helpful. Here's what would be helpful for me. Here's what you need to do. Express your strong disapproval, but without attack. This is not okay. And you can have a very calm and serious voice and say, this is not okay. Here's what I need you to do. State your expectations. You have to show your child how to make amends. And that's a step we often leave out. So they're upset. And remember, gifted children are highly sensitive. So maybe it's there's been an incident and they're upset and now they're in their room. How do you come back? How do you come back into where the rest of the family is and save face? And so it's always good if you let them know, why don't you cool off, and when you're ready to come back, just come back and we'll be doing this. Because sometimes there's that embarrassing thought, oh, now do I feel foolish? They're going to come back, and So you want to offer them that opportunity of just come back in. And I talk to teachers about this too, and they do it really well of just say, we're going to continue to play this game or do this activity. When you're ready, just join in, and we won't say anything about it. And you have to be true to that. So when they do join in with the rest of the family, now that is not the time to say, and you're not going to do that again anymore, right? Because you just brought up emotion again. So just let them know that, look, you came back, you're over it, let's all move on. Sometimes offering a choice, even though it doesn't seem like a choice, is a really good thing to do. So you can be angry, but you need to go in the other room. If you want to stay here, you're going to have to change your attitude. So that doesn't really feel like a choice. It really feels like, look, change your attitude. But it could be go in the other room. So letting them have that is helpful. Certainly letting the child experience the consequences. And the consequences might not be as obvious as, well, if you don't pick up your toys, you trip on them. It could be something that happens to you as a family. When you shut down like this, I lose desire to help you. When you talk to your brother like that, he doesn't want to play with you. So sometimes they need to realize that some of those things happen. But you're doing all of this before you're executing any punishment. What you don't want to do is say, oh, this happened, then this happened. Try and navigate that without the punishment, because once you go down the punishment route, a couple things happen. For one, after a while they get desensitized. Oh yeah, go to the room, got it. Yeah, I'll go do that, right? And then you have to just keep upping the punishment. And uh-oh, what am I going to do now? And then you say things like, you're grounded for a year, and that you realize that sounds ridiculous. So you have to kind of think about, okay, how am I going to manage those punishments? The other thing that happens is when you punish, then you've raised the emotion. And now everybody's upset. So you want to try to limit that as much as possible. Sometimes you do that by having a talk with your child. And this is kind of what you maybe picture that talk with. We need to have a talk. Unfortunately, this is really what your Generation Z child pictures is this lecture. Oh, here we go. And gifted kids in particular are really good at behaving in a way that makes you think that they're getting it. So they're giving you feedback, going, I know, yeah, And really what's happening in their head is something totally different of like, man, when is this going to be over? So, so when you have that talk, really think about, how much am I listening? How much am I, on the receiving end of what's happening here? And maybe that happens with a lot of questions rather than a lot of, and when I was your age, and that kind of thing. Incidentally, with that too, we refer a lot of times to, well, when I was a kid, when I was your age, and this is what I used to do. And that can be helpful sometimes, but it's also okay to tell them about you right now. And that goes back to modeling. So it's okay to say something like, the other day I was at work and I was really frustrated too, because I couldn't get, this program to work on my computer, and I was really frustrated. And you know what I finally did? I just went outside for a walk. And this is a teacher trick teachers use all the time, and it works like a charm. As soon as you say, what happened to me yesterday? Because, they think that you live in your desk drawer, first of all, if you're a teacher. So when you say, yesterday I was at the grocery store, they suddenly go, what? They're fascinated. But they also really like that idea of, hey, This is something that adults do too. So too many parents, again, because we have this focus on this is our baby on board, right? It's all about you. It's okay sometimes to make it about you in part of that conversation, just like you would almost with a friend, and say, yeah, you know what, I had a thing like that at work the other day too, and here's what I did. What do you think? And I promise you, if you try that one thing, I bet your child will come back to you and say, hey, Mom, you know what, I tried that thing. I went for, I got up to sharpen my pencil, and it just gave me some time to get up and move around. Because that's something that they feel like, hey, this is problem solving like a grown-up does. Okay. So sometimes in that talk too, we want to give them some envisioning language. So not only about here's what I've done as an adult, but also the idea of envisioning language is helping your child envision what's going to happen before it happens. Gifted kids for sure, but most kids really like to know what's going to happen next. What's this going to be like? And too often we put them in the car and we take them somewhere or we do something and they didn't know what was going to happen next, and then we're angry because they're behaving badly in the fancy restaurant. So if we do that envisioning language, we can talk about, so remember, we're going out with Grandma and Grandpa tonight. It's kind of a nice place because we're celebrating something. So we're going to be kind of dressed up, and we go in. It might be kind of quiet in there. You know the place, and there's some nice music. And so when we go in, we want to be really quiet and respectful because it's going to be mostly adults. And when we go in, we're going to sit down. And so you let them have this whole scenario that they can rehearse in their head. And then what happens is when you get there, they do it, and it works like a charm, and you don't have to go, stop it. Right? Because that's the worst thing when you are in that position of now I have to discipline in a public place or in a situation, and I can't believe you didn't know better. Here's the problem. They don't know better. Just because they're smart kids, they don't necessarily know all the tricks and all the things that they're supposed to do. So some other scenarios, we talked about the fancy restaurant. A new friend. Okay, so you have this new friend coming over. This is what we do when a friend comes over. We offer them a glass of milk. We play what they want to play. Remember, we're allowed in this room in the house, but we're not allowed in this room in the house. So again, if they know ahead of time, you have guests coming to dinner. That's another scenario. These who the guests are. I expect you to come, say hello, how are you? I do that with my stepkids and say things to them like, let's think of some stories that you could tell. Because you know relatives are going to say, how's school? And you could say, it's good. But let's give them something a little bit more interesting than that, right? So let's think ahead of time of what's a good story to tell, what's going on. And so you help them rehearse that, because what's embarrassing to them is that when you're right there saying, tell them about the project you're doing of Abraham Lincoln, tell them about that. And they go, I don't want to. And then you think, why do I have this shy kid all of a sudden? But if before company comes you say, oh, what would be great is if when they ask you about school, you could tell them about that project that you're working on. They might think that's really interesting. They'll do it all by themselves, and then it's a win-win because the friends and family will say, your kids are so well behaved, and your kid's smiling, going, yes, and you say, oh, yes, well, of course they are. Vacation with another family, joining a new after-school activity, any other scenarios you can think of that sometimes you get yourself into and think, oh, this is not my kid. Who's behaving like this? That you think you could have, if I could have done some envisioning language. Think of any others? What's that?
Like a company party.
A company party, sure. Yeah, a work party where there's other kids. And sometimes you have to set them up for things that, the other kids there are all going to be much younger than you. Or they're all going to be much older. So it might not be totally fun for you. And I think it's fair to be honest with kids. It might not be the most fun, but it's not polite to say something's boring. This is what's expected. This is what to do. Yeah.
I've noticed not with my kids, but my kids' friends with birthday parties and just like expectation now for, there's a game. Not everyone's going to win this game. You might not win this game.
Right.
You had a birthday party and he's like, does everyone get a prize? Well, no, now you guys are eating. Like not everyone gets a prize. And a lot of the kids don't,
right.
Like losing it.
Right. And that's a really good point too, is when you're the parent hosting the birthday party, it's actually okay for you to do this for all of the kids. To say, hey kids, we're going to play some games today, we're going to have cake, but nobody's going to eat the cake until the birthday boy gets his piece first or whatever. You set it. They love rules. Great. That's the rule. That's what we're doing then. And if it's your house, they will say that. So I have so many friends that say things like, oh, you know, I invite these people over and their kids run wild. And I go, don't let them. It's your house. I think it's really simple to say, hi, come on in. You know what? I have some toys here, and you can have juice, but you can only have it in the kitchen, and you can play right here, and you're not allowed on the steps in my house. Have fun. No one thinks you're rude when you do that. In fact, it's very comforting for everybody. The other parent is like, oh, thank you. Now I don't have to yell at my kid in your house. You're happy. And then when they do get on the stairs, then you can go, oh, I'm sorry. Remember what I said? We don't get on the stairs in my house. So don't worry about doing that. That's kind of a change in parenting that we've seen over years too. Remember when we were kids, other parents yelled at us all the time, right? And it was yelling. But now there's kind of this thing of, oh no, that's so-and-so's kid. That's, you know, you can do that too. So really think about that envisioning language of just, before we start this, here's how this is going to go. And that's really, really very effective. When you listen to your child, make sure that you are seeking first to understand and then be understood. And sometimes that's harder to do because sometimes they're harder to understand, especially very young children that don't have the language. So ask questions, be patient. Those reflective questions are, well, what do you think about that? How does that feel? Model good listening. This is something else I'm always harping on teachers about too, because we're busy people. And so when kids come up and say, I want to tell you something, I want to tell you a story, and you say, oh, yeah, tell me. And you're flipping through something, or you're texting. And sorry, nobody in this room, of course, but I do see lots of parents do that, texting going, uh-huh. And so here's what's going to happen. Your 6-year-old's going to grow up to be a 16-year-old that does that to you, and you're not going to be happy with that. So model good listening to say, just a minute, let me finish this, finish it. Okay, now go ahead. That doesn't mean you have to drop what you're doing the minute that they want to speak to you. But it is okay to say, just a minute, I'm doing something. Let me finish, and now it's your turn. And really show good listening. And strive for authenticity. I think that's the biggest thing that gifted kids can see right through. They don't like adults that are not authentic, and they will tell you that about other adults that they mean, I don't really like that person. Well, why not? She seems fake. So you don't have to tell them that everything's fantastic, amazing. You know, if they're telling you something that is interesting to you, say it's interesting. If you have questions about it, ask questions. But don't go overboard. They notice that right away. All right. We want to make sure that we're empowering them, though, to be critical thinkers and helping them solve problems and navigate their way through things. So I'm going to go through this quickly. This is a problem-solving, almost step-by-step system that you go through. And with that, you listen to the child state their needs. Okay, so I just kind of went through this scenario here. You seem upset that you have to miss the party. And then you summarize their point of view. So, gosh, you worked on your homework, but you still didn't get it done on time to go to the party. But then you have to express your feelings and needs. So my concern is that you will get further behind if you don't complete it now. And then you invite the child to brainstorm with you. So let's brainstorm. Let's think, wonder what we can do to keep this from happening again. Okay? And you write down all of the ideas without evaluating. Here's what will happen at stage 5, though, is that if emotion is high, you will get something like, well, we could just never do my homework again, or we could just not go to school ever again. Here's what you do at that point, because you want emotion down, cognition high. So if you add to the emotion, now we have more emotion. So instead you say, okay, so not go to school anymore. What else you got? I'm not fazed by that ridiculous comment. I'm not giving you any emotion. I'm going to write it down. Give me another one. And then they'll say, oh, well, okay. So the more ridiculous they are, just write them down. And then that gets old. And okay, well, now I'm going to really think of ideas. And then together decide on which ones are reasonable to act on. By doing this, let me tell you the trick of this. Sometimes the answer to the question is so obvious, and as an adult you know it and you see it from a mile away. But by going through this process, you're empowering them. You're giving your child an opportunity to solve their own problem, and that's a really powerful thing to do. So think about that when you go, oh gosh, this would be so easy just to say, fine, here's what we're doing, here's how this is going to go down. But let them do that. I always share a silly story of teaching fourth graders. We had 2 playground balls that belonged to our classroom. And we had 1 playground ball that belonged to our classroom. And there were some kids that liked to play kickball and some kids that liked to play foursquare. Suddenly there was a conflict. Well, we wanted to play kickball, but they had the ball. And so it would have been really easy, right, to say, whoever takes the ball out first gets to decide, or, whatever. As a teacher, an adult, I could have fixed that really easily. But instead I went through and said, this is frustrating. So we have some children that want to play this and some that want to play this. What could we do? Oh my goodness, they came up with 100, things. All right, let's look at all of these choices. What do you think is most appropriate? And I had to laugh because one of them on the list, which of course I just dutifully added, was we could have a schedule. And it goes on a 6-day rotation, just like our, and on these days we play. So of course I wrote it on there, and then when we all came together, which should we vote on? That's what they voted on. And I had to say, I'm not managing the schedule, just so you know. And no, that's all right, we'll manage it. And, and again, this is why I love gifted kids. But I'll be darned if they didn't create that schedule. They had it on the door. It was somebody's job to create the schedule. And they just believed in it. They'd walk up to the door and go, oh, it's kickball today. Like it was just the law, and I thought, that is so ridiculous. But it worked for them, and it wasn't my problem. So, and it empowered them, and it built community among my class to say, hey, we decided this together. There was never another argument because, it's what we decided. That's the way it goes. So sometimes you get more bang for your buck, even though that probably took an entire, math lesson to go through that. I got more time in the long run because we didn't have to go through it anymore. So one of the things, though, this is my favorite, is don't think about elephants, right? So what are you thinking about right now? So this is true of all brains. And the idea is don't give warnings. And I just did it. But the idea is tell them what to do, not what not to do. So when you give a warning, what happens in their head is, now I'm envisioning this. Now I've pictured this. Now I'm rehearsing this. So when you give that full glass of juice and you say, don't spill it, guess what's happening to their head the whole way? Don't spill it, don't spill it. And invariably what happens? It spills. And especially for very young children, I would say 4 to 6, it takes a longer step in their brain to undo what's been done. In other words, the brain doesn't perceive don't, it perceives do. So instead of don't run, what do you hear? Run. So instead say, walk, please. Oh, walk. So instead of that whole sentence, can you kind of picture that? So think about the things that you say, don't fall, don't spill, don't run, stop that. Don't jump on the bed, be still, put your feet on the floor. Tell them what to do. So that's a really simple one. Did you have a hand up? Yes.
There was a pro baseball player on that topic. He had been told, I don't care what pitch you throw in a World Series game. And they said, I don't care what pitch you throw, but as long as you don't throw a such and such pitch. Well, so he's on the mound, and the only thing that goes through his head is, oh, that pitch, and he throws that pitch. So he ended up writing a book on say what you do want, not what you don't. Exactly.
Absolutely. It's really true for little kids. We get a little bit more, our brains get more sophisticated as we get older, but it's true for adults too. The idea of that's the word that sticks in your head. So yeah, really, really think about that. And that's a really good example. Any skills, any things that you're coaching, things like that, when you say, hey, don't stand like that, instead say, here's how to stand. Don't stir the cake batter like this, and say, here, watch me. So always kind of think about what should they do, not what they shouldn't do. So again, yeah, the brain has to go through that 2-step process to go through a negative construct, and in younger students, that's harder to do. And then you're more frustrated, aren't you, when you say, okay, I'm going to give you this, it's really full, don't spill it. And then they spill and you go, what did I just say? I know. And that's how they think, is like, I know you did. What is wrong with me, right? Because they know what it means. It's just what happens. So really be careful with warnings. And just some other cautions for you. High ability children are very good at constructing arguments in defense. You know this. Don't go there. Stay away from that. Because here's the problem, is you're going to lose and then you feel silly. And that's not a good place to be. So stay away from the argument in the defense. If your best argument is because I'm the parent, that's okay, but then they look at you like, really? That's all you got? You don't just avoid the argument altogether. High ability children tend toward reactive thinking rather than proactive, and we need to teach them and get them in the practice of being proactive. And that's what that envisioning language will be for you, is to say, here's what's going to happen tonight. Here's what we're going to do tomorrow. This weekend, this is what's coming up. It doesn't have to be a lecture. It's just envisioning language. But otherwise, they'll just react and say, well, I didn't know this was going to happen to me. So you want to protect against that. High ability children are very verbal. They can make the illogical seem logical. So, oh, by the way, when emotions go up, cognition goes down. Guess what? That's true for you too. So if they get your emotions up, you're not thinking clearly. And then you'll say things that you go, why did I say that? What happened there? High ability children often feel that they have to be right. And so it's that last word and that, yes, but, well, and, and that kind of last word thing. Just ignore those. Just don't just let that go. Just ignore it totally. Don't even look at it. Because if you say, you don't have to have the last word, well, I do too, and then you're back to the first one. You got yourself in an argument with someone who is going to win, so don't do that. The calmer you stay, the better that is. So thinking about things, and again, these are all teacher tricks, but they work really well. Your hands are really a tell. So this is true in animal species too. The higher your hands go, the more out of control you are. And that's happy or angry, right? So if you feel yourself getting angry, put your hands behind your back and hold them, because that's your tell that you're about to lose it. And gifted kids are smart enough to go, if I just get you in this just right spot, I had a student once, this is a true story, and it was after school, and he was playing with some Legos or something in the classroom, and I said, you better get going. Your mom's going to be here. She's going to be late. And he looked at the clock and he said, nope, not mad enough. And I said, what? And he said, well, I'm late now, so she'll be mad. And he said, but if I wait a little while, she'll be crazy mad and nothing will happen. And it just made me laugh because I thought, man, he's got it figured out. Just angry enough, and then she's going to apply consequences to me. But if I wait a little while, she's out of control and I'm scot-free. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Taught me a lot of how to handle him too. But they pick up on those things. So watch your body language. Put your hands in your pockets if you need to, behind your back, something like that. Some of those things are a tell. Your tone of voice, all of those things will help with that. When you're helping your child problem solve, you want to be reflective. And again, this goes back to, the answer quite automatically. But you want to be reflective. You want to help them get to the answer on their own. So here's a scenario I just spelled out. So the parent says, it looks like you're upset about something. The child says, well, Corey said my drawing was bad. Oh, that probably made you feel bad. Yeah, and it was only my rough draft. You think he judged your picture before you even had a chance to get it the way you wanted? So what is the parent doing right there? What is that sentence doing? You think he judged your picture before you even had a chance to get it the way you wanted? What do you think? Really, it's just paraphrasing. It's recognizing their feelings. So it's paraphrasing. Let me help you identify your frustration here. And that's going to make them feel good, actually. Yes, thank you. You heard me. You get what I'm saying. Okay? So, but then sometimes a child jumps to a, yes, he's not my friend anymore. So what we want to do as parents is say, no, 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 don't be silly, don't be like that. But instead, let them go there. And this is really hard to do. This is like letting your child, cross the street by themselves. You say, so you're thinking of not being friends with him anymore. So I'm going to say what you just said in different words, and maybe you'll see it's ridiculous. Okay, so let me repeat it so you can catch on. And then the child says, well, he doesn't like me. So you think because he doesn't like your drawing that he doesn't like you? Let me show you the ridiculous parallel that you're making. Again, you're not saying, well, don't be silly. That is not what he thinks. Yes, it is, because now you're in an argument. What you want to do is, okay, so what you're saying is this. Am I correct? And then the child will say, well, sometimes he gets jealous of me. Hopefully that resolves in, okay, I see what you're doing here. The idea, though, is you don't want to give them the answer. You want them to figure it out. Yes?
The thing that occurs to me is that this cycle of the conversation just can go on and on. So I tend to try and say to the child, what did you think of it? And whose opinion matters in that? Only because I've been in these and they just spin like out of control, and I have no idea how to get either back on track or get back to what we're supposed to be doing. Or
It sure does. And it can spin out of control if those emotions are high again. So if emotions stay high, then it's, but he still hates me and I don't even care because I can't get you into that cognition stage. And you might not be able to, so then that's when you do say, what did you think of the picture? Let me talk to you about something else. But the parent instinct here with a case like this would be, well, I think your picture's beautiful. Well, he's not very nice. Well, that wasn't very nice of him. And so what we're doing is, and really maybe the child doesn't think that the other kid's not very nice. But I'm kind of throwing that out there to see if you'll bite with me. Are you going to go there with me? And so when you ask those reflective questions, this could take forever too. I mean, granted, this might be not something that you would spend that much time on. But if you're in the car, you're driving home, and something comes up like this, practice it. And just say, what would it be like if I just repeated almost what you're saying in different words? To see if I could get you to come to the answer that I see as appropriate. And they will. It may take some time, but you want to use that on the ones that matter. Be careful that you don't own the problem, that the child owns it if it's their problem. So just in these scenarios, Johnny's mean to me and we fix it. Oh, don't play with him anymore. I can't find here, wear these shoes today, wear these flip-flops today. I want to go to the store with you, but Karen's coming over. I can't make this decision. What am I to do? Well, here, I'll fix that for you. So in all of these scenarios, the parent is owning the problem. Let me own that and fix it for you. That's why you're exhausted at the end of the day, by the way. So you're solving all their problems. Make them do that. So we do that by offering some choice, and that's really hard to do. Mom, I need a poster board tonight. We have to go to the store. So that's when you say, would you like to use something else we have in the house, or do you want to go to the store in the morning? I'm not going now, is the answer to that. So it's not, too bad I'm not going, or here's what's frustrating to kids too is, I'll go and you're going to hear about it the whole way there, the whole way home, and then, now everybody's mad at each other. Emotion high, cognition low. So instead, I'm not going now, but these are the things I'll do to help you solve your problem. Here's one that's always hard for parents. Forgot my lunch money. Well, you're going to be hungry when you get home. What would you like for a snack? Or what does the school have in place for you to do? I had a student, she was late for school all the time and talked to mom, why is she late all the time? And mom said, she eats her breakfast so slowly. It's just slow bite after slow bite. And I said, no, time's up. Get in the car. Time to go. Send her to a school without breakfast. And this mom went, I can't send my child to school without breakfast. I said, she will be hungry 2 days, and that's it. I promise you. Right? And don't we figure that out as adults of, oh, that stunk. I should have woke up earlier. I didn't get my coffee this morning or whatever. So we want to put those scenarios to our children. Those are hard to do because you feel like that's your job as a parent of let me fix this for you. And that in the long run, that doesn't help them at all. You really want them to fix it. Another one I like is, I don't want to clean my room right now, that whining thing. Sometimes giving a choice to say, okay, can you do it by this time? That's really freeing, and you'll get a cleaner room if you do that. Because sometimes, would you like if somebody came into your work office and said, I need you to do this right now. Drop everything you're doing. Hey, wait a minute. You know, you wouldn't like that either. So again, just giving your child that respect and saying, I need your room cleaned by 4. Can we make sure that happens? Yep. So they have a little bit of choice and flexibility in that. Just a couple things about following directions, and this is more for younger children, just to kind of think about one instruction at a time until they've mastered that. And then you can add 2. Some kids, even if they're 10 years old, they still struggle with 2 directions at a time, and it's not because they're not bright. This is really struggle for gifted kids a lot of times because they hear the first instruction and they start that envisioning that we talked about. Oh yeah, I'm going to do that, and that's going to be, and they didn't hear your second instruction. So don't suggest, offer, or ask. So this is, we're guilty of this, and then we get frustrated by saying, I think you might need a jacket. No, I don't need a jacket. I think you might need a jacket. No, I don't. I don't need a jacket. No, and then you know what you do as parents? Put a jacket on. No. So if you want the jacket on, say, get a jacket. You don't have to wear it, but just hold it. Doesn't that feel a little different? Get a jacket. Let's just leave it in the car in case somebody needs it. It's a little bit, feels a little bit better. Make sure your child is attentive before you give instructions. That seems so simple. Make sure your spouse is attentive before you give instructions. You know, when somebody's looking at the TV or on the phone or something like that, and you give instructions and then say, you didn't hear me, you didn't do that. And praise your child for being compliant, or thank you for doing that. You know, that's always a nice, respectful thing to do. Just talking to your child with specificity really helps. Creating critical thinkers by getting them to fill in more of the answer for you. So instead of, did you have a good day at school, ask, what happened at school today that surprised you, pleased you, challenged you? I offer this one a lot to parents that have kids that are not so verbal, and they say, I don't know. I say, how was school? And they say, I was fine. Did you learn anything? Yeah. So ask better questions then. So who did you play with today at school? Did you guys ever finish that math thing that you were doing? You know, ask those specific questions. Think about the same thing about you. If someone said to you, how was your day? Don't you say, pretty good. So kids are no different than that. Encourage them to make connections. So what is this like? Have you learned something like this before? What does this remind you of? Is this something you already knew? Those making connections, again, helps them fill in a little bit more so that you're not giving them too much of the, you know, sometimes we give kids multiple choice questions when we could be giving them essay questions. And I mean that in life, not necessarily in school. Just some fun things, again, that I've used in the classroom that are fun to use at home. Gifted kids tend to like little acronyms or you know, different ways. So a PMI is plus minus interesting. So after they have some experience, a birthday party, okay, what were the pluses? What were the minuses? What did you find interesting? So it's just kind of a more fun way than how was the party? It was good, you know, you get a little bit more. I like FIP, First Important Priorities. That's a good Saturday morning acronym there of like, okay, so today our FIPs are our First Important Priorities. Again, that's something that your child can remember of, oh, that's right, I have to clean my room before I do that because that's a first important priority. Just something silly. OPV is other people's viewpoints. So, you know, again, when you have a child that's pouting or upset, oh, you know what, maybe we need to look at the OPVs. It doesn't matter if you really remember these or you make up your own. It's just sometimes that's an easy way to communicate, and kids like, oh, we kind of have a little secret family code that we talk about things like that, and it's kind of fun. Just to spend a little bit of time talking about praise. There's a lot of research recently on praise, and it's really pretty interesting. You have to be really careful with praise. And along with this new generation of children, as we've talked about, you're a new generation of parents. And as parents and educators, we are praise junkies. We overpraise children. As a result, they don't find the authenticity in the praise. And we're really creating children that don't really believe what we say. And they lack confidence in themselves. So instead of evaluating, describe what you see or hear. Instead of, I love your picture, that's a great picture. Say, You used a lot of different colors in that picture. It's interesting how you chose to put a frame around the picture. Do you hear how that's different than your picture's great? Because they hear great all the time. And what does that really mean? Instead of criticizing, point out what needs to be done. So, well, I don't think you really spent a lot of time on that. Instead, say, let's go back and see if you can add more colors to this. Be as specific as possible with your praise. They've done some studies with praise and noticed that children that are told that they're smart during a test do not have the confidence that children who are told that they're trying hard. And so children that were told, you're really smart, and then they asked them, would you like to do more questions? The children that were told they were smart said, no, thank you, I'm finished now. The children that were told, you're working really hard on this. Would you like to do some more? They said, yeah, I would. So there's something really frightening about telling kids that they're smart, that they're pretty, because that is not something that they feel like they did. So when we say you're smart, you're pretty, or we define who they are, they want to stop right there. Great, quit while I'm ahead. Looks like I'm good to go, so I'm not going to try anything else. Our gifted kids are naturally fall victims of this because we've told them they're smart for a long time. And they get praised for that. They feel good about that. What happens, though, is then they don't want to try new things. They don't want to take risks. So really be careful with that, with your praise. You can't just replace the words either. I said this workshop before, and I had parents saying, okay, well, now I go around and say, oh, you tried hard. Oh, you tried hard. And I said, no, that's still the same thing. Be as authentic as you possibly can. And sometimes don't say anything. Sometimes just look at it. When they say, look at my picture, look at this. I see. That's all. Just nothing this time. And another time you might say something. If you're doing something with them and they say, look at how high I can jump. Say, yeah, look at how high I can jump too. That'll really make them go, whoa, it's not all about me. And you really want them to have that feeling, yeah, we're both jumping high. We're both doing this together. And that's okay to do. But we really need to be careful with praise. Another I just wanted to talk about too, this was a video clip I had before, but there are some cultural discrepancies with praise, which is really pretty interesting. And we notice that our Anglo-Saxon families, the praise is off the charts of empty praise is what the researchers call that. If you're smart, you're good at this, everyone gets a trophy, you know, all of those kinds of things. And in other cultures, it's more factual. You know, no, that's not the case. I was reading something about the Wii Fit game, you know, the Wii Fit that you do exercise, but it's a video game. And that was made in Asia. And when they brought it over here to sell in the United States, they had to, the first ones that were released, Americans went, wait, we can't have this. Because people would get on the Wii scale and do it, and it would say, you're overweight. You're not very good at this. You need to practice more. And of course, as Americans, we went, don't, you're crushing us. So the Asians had to fix that and say something like, here's your actual, you know, data, whatever. But interestingly enough, we're creating this culture of just lie to us, please. When really, we don't have to lie, and we don't have to cover up either, but we could just provide data. So children like this, 21st century learners really like data of, you got 3 out of 4 shots that time. Cool, now go for your 5th shot and see how many. Great, there's a little math thing that we're doing too. So provide them with data, you know. Boy, tonight I didn't even have to ask you twice to eat your vegetables. You just ate your vegetables. I don't have to say if it's good or bad. I'm just telling you. And probably if I'm recognizing it, it means I think it's pretty cool. So just be careful with some of those things that you don't have to always say, good job, good job, good job. Because then they become kind of praise junkie. But using that descriptive feedback as much as possible. So 100% test. You know, what could you say? Let me hear from some of you. What do you think? Your child brings home a test that has 100% on it. What do you want to say to them? I know you want to say good job, but what should you say to them? You really worked hard on that? That's good?
You got every single one right?
You got every single one right. Might be interesting to even ask a question. To say, what did you do to get this 100%? Was this easy for you? Did you work on this? Your child scores a goal at the soccer game. What could you say then?
I heard one parent talk about his father and how his dad would never say, "Good job for winning," or "I'm sorry you lost." He would always say, "I really enjoyed watching you play."
Nice, yeah. Really enjoyed watching you play. Yeah, and they need to know that too, that it just was fun to watch you play. When your child is chosen for a specific part, that's a good time to say, "I can't wait to see you do that. That's going to be fun for me." So that they know that it's not you were the best, you won the prize, that kind of thing, because that can be an insecure feeling of, what if next time I don't get the solo part? What if I don't make a goal next time? So, we want to build that up. Yes?
Sometimes I'll say or ask, do you feel really proud of yourself, or you must feel good?
Mm-hmm.
So is that
Yeah, no, that's great. Getting them to identify, how do you feel about that? And I think it's good, too, to say, how do you feel? I feel proud. I bet you do. I would, too. Again, they like it when you kind of come back to, here's how I am. I'm a person, too. They want to know that you're a person. So kind of thinking about that, that descriptive feedback and authentic language. Just some things I think about. Again, that authenticity is, you don't have to say, well, Mom thinks right now, or Dad's. You use I. They want you to talk to them like a regular person. Make your message match your tone, just meaning that if you're being serious, have a serious tone. If you're being silly or playful, then you can have a playful tone. Just make that match that. But sometimes we put that fake smile on, and they know that doesn't match. Show that you're human. If you make a mistake, apologize. That really teaches your child a lot when you go back and say, "I'm so sorry. You know what? I think I was a little short with you on the way home today, and I didn't mean to, and here's why." That really would go a long way. Encourage that two-way dialogue. Talk about real things. In other words, it's not just you and your day and your world. It could be about, isn't it a beautiful day? I love it when the weather changes. Isn't that nice? They need to practice having actual conversations with people, and who better to do that with than their parents? So a couple of references I do want to tell you about, and a lot of this came from there, is this is a great one. How to Talk So Your Kids Can Learn at Home and in School is a wonderful book. And then the research on praise is from a book called Nurture Shock. I cannot recommend that one enough. I think we did a book study with it with some Cats parents a few years back. Interestingly enough, I just met Ashley Merriman at the Gifted Conference, and her new book is called Top Dog, and it's all about competition, and that's pretty interesting as well. The Power of Our Words, Guiding the Gifted Child by James Webb is always a good one, just for more information about gifted kids. And then Kevin Lehman does a lot of great stuff, Making Children Mind Without Losing Yours, a lot of funny scenarios and things like that, but sometimes that's helpful to have those scenarios in place that you can read and refer to. And by the way, as a teacher, I always would say to kids too, hey, I just took a class, I just took a workshop, and I learned this, and we're gonna try it for a while. And they really like that. And I think that's okay for you to do as parents too, to tell your children, hey, you know what, I'm still learning to be a better parent all the time, and I just read this book. What do you think about this? I'd be curious. And I think for gifted kids too, it's really good for them to see is that anything that you tackle in life, whether it's your job or parenting or a new club that you do, you're constantly learning too. And as we think about 21st century learners, that's really what they're headed for, is being critical thinkers that know how to judge right from wrong, solve problems, and that they're constantly learning. There's not going to be an end to that learning. So if you have specific questions, I would be happy to entertain those. Otherwise, I think it's a good opportunity for you to chat with each other as well. Are there any general questions? Yeah.
Are we seeing a trend where everybody gets a ribbon is going away? Because I think that especially for gifted children and whatnot, their expectation of what they get rewarded for is very different than, you participated on a team, whatever, especially as moving into Odyssey of the Mind and those types of things where there are contests and judgments and, and there's only one winner, we have the conversation in our house constantly about the voice, and that, you know, and you're welcome to, you know, you're welcome to sing, there can only be one winner, you know, so you need to recognize that while it may be something that you enjoy doing and that you may or may not have aptitude for, it may not necessarily be reality show or prize worthy, you know. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, and it doesn't mean that you can't feel good about doing it, but not everybody wins. There's not always a ribbon.
Yeah, read Ashley Merriman's book on Top Dog, and I haven't read it yet, but I just heard her speak, but she talks a lot about that. We are moving away from the everyone gets a ribbon, but a couple things that she talked about I thought were really interesting is boys tend to handle competition better than girls, just because of her research says just because of the play, that boys tend to play in twos, in dyads. Hey, you do this, I'll do this. Let's see which one's faster. Let's see which one's better. So they do it, it's a natural part of play. And girls play in groups. And girls select their friends of, do you like the same thing I do? Do you? Great, we're a group. You know, and as soon as one person says, I don't like that, you're not in the group then. So we don't do, you know, we don't do that, oh, we're just going to see whose is better, and then that's cool, like boys do. So the girls have a harder time with it is one of the things that she found. And the other thing is competition isn't good unless you have a chance of winning. So in other words, it has to be the right competition for you, right? So even the blowout, even the team that wins by 80 points, that's not good for them either. It has to be we both have a chance of winning. So those are some of the things that she talks about. And yeah, we are kind of moving away from that everyone gets a ribbon because the kids don't really like it either, is the truth. They walk away and go, whatever. So, you know, and then where do you put those? So yeah, we are kind of moving away from that. Yeah.
Actually, comment to add on to, you know, when emotions are high and trying to get the cognitive. You know, some kids aren't very verbal or don't want to have that conversation. Something I've learned is actually doing an activity with them that involves both sides of the brain, such as taking one of those squishy balls and, you know, they have to throw it back and forth. Doing something like that, my understanding, I believe, can raise the cognitive because it involves both sides of the brain and can lower the emotions. So that can be helpful for parents when your kid just won't engage in that cognitive conversation.
Absolutely. Something that you have to do physically, but also might take your mind. So that idea of like, put your hands like this, go like this. Can you know, that definitely brings emotion down, and then cognition is a little bit closer to being able to be brought up. That's a great one. And another one Dr. Belgian talks about too is sometimes putting like little beads or whatever in clay or something like that. So it almost feels like a tedious task if I need you to take all the beads out of the clay. And they'll, they just sort of get mesmerized. And it's very calming for kids that have, and that's more of like intense high emotions or anxiety. That really helps calm them sometimes those mundane tasks. So, yeah, thank you for that. Somebody else?
Yeah. The question you had mentioned, and really stuck with me, is our kids are headed for careers that do not exist today. And it kind of got me thinking, especially I think of STEAM or STEM and learning. Are universities prepared for these kids? What are you seeing out there? Are kind of sometimes I wonder. I think at the local level we're doing a good job of getting our kids ready with STEM or STEAM education. But are there universities ready for our kids?
Hopefully, that's a great question. Hopefully, we will make them become so. But I think so. We hear good things about ASU integrating more, and it's not just one discipline. It's going into other disciplines as well. And I think part of that, when we talk about the STEM and the STEAM, it's not because, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not that we're trying to create all engineers for, the careers of the future. The idea is that is a profession that is an integrated, it's applying math, science, technology, and problem solving all at once. So that's really why we use it. It's not about because we want you to be an engineer. Sorry, some people will say that. Engineers will say that. We need more engineers out here, and that is true. But as educators, we really feel like here's a field that integrates, and it's that problem solving. And those are the tasks that, again, in 21st century learners, that's why in the CATS program we use problem-based learning. They love that authentic task of, hey, we all need to pitch in and do this together, and I happen to need to do my math in order to figure out how to do that. So especially with the CATS teachers, we talk a lot about creating that need to know. So how do we make them, want to know this? So they go, hey, how do you do this? How do you add fractions? Because I need to add a fraction to figure out, whatever measurements I'm doing. So we're creating that need to know. As far as I think the universities are, going to step up too and see that, because we're going to graduate a lot of students who want this integrated approach to problem solving. But I think we're seeing it more at our universities. Yeah. Yes.
I'm just curious to know, my daughter, this is just her second year in CATS, in the 4th grade, and I'm just curious to know if any other parents have experienced this, but I've actually experienced a little bit more behavioral things since she's gone into CATS than when she was in a more traditional classroom. And so it kind of raised some concern for me as to whether the environment was the most suitable for her, because she shined in the traditional room. And then here it's, she's too chatty, so has anyone experienced that? Do you hear people talking about that? And there are things which I really don't relate to as something negative. And I'm thinking, well, she's social. I'm glad she doesn't have difficulties with that, but it's now become, kind of always a topic of conversation.
Well, it could be, and I don't know. But sometimes I have seen in my experience that bright kids in a regular classroom setting get this sort of formula of here's what good at school means. And I've got this. This is really easy. Good at school, I can do. Put your name at the top. You answer the questions. Sometimes you listen. Sometimes you don't have to listen, but you can answer those questions because you're smart enough to do it. And you turn it in, and it goes in here. And then, when you're finished, you get to help the teacher. A lot of those things happen. And so they get good at that. Then in a classroom where the challenge is constantly, well, maybe it's this. How about this? What would you do with this? Then it's, that might make her feel a little restless sometimes. Or a little, I don't have the formula down right. I used to have this, and I knew exactly what to do. And now, and again, I don't know the scenario, but sometimes what we're trying to do in that classroom is, you do this, and I'm going to ask you to do this now. Now you do this, and I'm going to ask you to do this.
And you were saying, she was like your teacher's helper, being sent to do everything. But so how do you support? Because then it's all these conversations at home of, okay, well, you need to be on task, and talking this. And I just didn't know if other parents were experiencing that, or how normal that was, and what you advise parents to support the children, because it is a great environment. But they're just different goals now than what we've ever received for her.
Well, and I think part of that is that kind of shifting the praise and the recognition for her working hard, for her meeting goals. Setting goals is a great thing to do. Say, you know what, let's set a goal this week. That here's what you're going to do. And it's not about finishing first or those kinds of things, but your goal is going to really be to, something that you think that she needs to work on. And then just set that goal. Great, you did that, because that has worked for her in the past of do these 7 things, and that's all you have to do, So now she's being pushed a little bit. So I would maybe think about that, goal setting with her and having those.
That's not exclusive. Has anyone else experienced that?
I'm kind of seeing some nods, yeah.
Okay.
Is it kind of a reverse modeling thing? Because I have noticed it, and I almost wonder if she gets so much of that in the classroom that she kind of reverses and uses it at home. Instead of just taking in something and just thinking, being satisfied with that, she's always questioning it or taking it to the next level. But that's also what they're teaching in the classroom.
Oh, so like questioning authority?
Not necessarily questioning authority, but not just being settled with the way that it was. Always taking it to the next level and pushing
Why?
conversation, the whys and that. But I could do that, or you want me to do that, but if I do that, you do this. And she's thinking beyond what you're just saying in the moment.
Celebrate that. That's a good thing. I know it doesn't feel like it, but really that is, you want her to be that critical thinker. It feels like, yeah, but you're challenging authority. But the truth is, you want her to live in a world that she says, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. Do I want that? Do I believe in that? What do I think about that? You want that more than, I think you do, more than do as you're told, So I think that comes with it is too that experimenting of, maybe I'm not sure if I like your decisions, And so that's a hard thing to be, but you're right. we are kind of encouraging that in the classroom of question this, ask about this, look at this from another angle, look at it from another perspective. And that, yeah, that can be uncomfortable.
Setting all these goals, doesn't it make kind of limiting their exposure?
Setting goals, limiting their exposure, how?
Like limiting themselves, saying that, hey, this is what I should be expecting for the next week or so.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, I think the thing with goal setting is then we always want to have the next goal. Great. You mastered that one, you achieved that goal, here's the next goal. But sometimes it's not this constant, I'm constantly improving, but I have that goal and I'm just going to do this much. You know, if I wanted to start running, I might just say, just going to go for a quarter of a mile. If I can do that, now we're going to go for half a mile, you know. So I think that's what we're doing is then it's constant goal setting. All right. Well, I thank you guys so much for coming, and this will be a video that I will send out to you, and other colleagues or spouses that didn't get a chance to see it too, and we'll go ahead and I'll put the PowerPoint also on the website. Our next workshop, do you remember what it is, Lisa? Sorry, I don't either. Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah. No, thank you, Shameen. So this is a workshop series. So the next one is actually it's in January, and it's our high school showcase. And really, I particularly invite parents of 4th graders through 8th grade, but if you have a younger child than that, you're welcome to come. All of our Chandler high schools are represented there. They bring former CAT students that are now in high school at each of the different high schools. Counselors are there, advanced placement and honors teachers are there so that you ask questions. And we started this a few years ago because I really want CATS parents to realize, hear so many parents say, yeah, and then we have the CATS program, and then in high school we have nothing. And that's not the case at all. Our high schools are phenomenal. And so I really want you to see that we don't call it the CATS program anymore, but we have some fantastic programs at the high school that are great for your kids. So you're welcome to do that. We do it at the Center for the Arts, and that's a great event for you to be at. And so go back to the website and look at these workshops. That one, it's nice if you sign up, but we'll take a couple hundred people at that Center for the Arts, so that's a great big one. All right? Thank you for coming, and I do want to thank Lisa Sianovich for helping organize this. Appreciate that.